What's up? It's Matt. We are live back with another expert roundup. I got the guy that wrote this book, one of the Dummies books, talking about leasing buildings. We're going to talk about some of the nuances and what you need to know. We'll be back in a second. Dale, my man, we had some technical difficulties, but we got through it. We're live finally. Tell everybody about yourself and about the author behind this book.
Well, Matt, I've been looking forward to doing this recording with you for a long time. I mean, you are so well known in the industry that it's really a privilege to be on your program, on your podcast. And so I'll let the viewers know that, even though I've been the lease coach for about 30 years, before that, I used to work for landlords. I was a shopping center manager. I was a leasing agent. Most of what I learned about commercial real estate was working for the landlord. And I realized in 1993, the landlord didn't need my help, the tenant did. So I switched to the other side and I became a professional lease consultant, and it's all gravy now.
So what was the encouragement? Like, well, one, I guess I got to ask, you see the Dummies books everywhere. How do you become an author or co-author with a Dummies series of books?
Well, the publisher is really well known. They're very approachable. And when I reached out to them to see if they were, John Wiley and Sons, if they were interested in my topic, they said yes. They did not have a book with this topic and this content. So it was a really kind of smooth process. Once we signed the publishing agreement, it was about a 9-month write. And it was quite difficult because, Matt, they made me write it very much within their format. I couldn't just talk. Everything had to fit into places. And it's been phenomenal. It's been out for years. It's in many of the Barnes and Nobles books and bookstores, and a lot of people buy it online. So yeah.
So let's dig into it. So I've negotiated a few leases. I actually own my building I'm in now, but I've had a few leases before this. I've got a couple other businesses and leases. I mean, they are complicated. I mean, because there are some things like you'll talk to one person and they got a triple net, a double net, a 9 net, whatever the hell they got. They got nets everywhere. But what are a couple that, if you're like talking to somebody right now that's looking at opening a business or they're getting ready to renew, right off the bat, what are your top 2 or 3 things you tell them to just really focus on and to start the process the right way?
Well, just a couple of weeks ago, I was actually speaking at the New York Restaurant Show for the 12th year in a row. So I did have an opportunity to speak to hundreds of restaurant tenants. Some were starting, some were doing the renewals. And most of the people listening to this podcast are probably existing restaurant owners. I mean, there's 600,000 restaurants in America. There's new startups all the time, but a lot of them are focused on renewals, right?
Yep.
And so if we want to talk about lease renewals, what I would encourage tenants to do is to start 12 months in advance. Don't rely on exercising your renewal option. At the Lease Coach, 98% of the successful lease renewal deals we do for tenants, we do not exercise the option. Okay, because most renewal options have wording that says the rent has to keep going up and nothing else is negotiable. And we want to renegotiate. I specialize in negotiating lease renewal rent reductions, right? Everybody wants a rent reduction. And that's what I do for a living. Now, of course, I've got the startup tenants. We do brand new leases and all that kind of thing. One tip, if you're starting out and you're looking at a new location, be careful if you get hooked up with a broker, because remember, the broker may be acting like he's representing you, but ultimately the broker's being paid by the landlord. Okay. And don't share the landlord's broker. If you see a for lease sign on a building, you're going to have to call that listing broker, but that broker's not there to help you. Okay. I'm not saying he's there to hurt you, but he's there to get the landlord the high rent, the biggest deposit, all the things he can, right? And so, what I jokingly say, when was the last time someone did a lot of work for you for free, right? Well, that's the broker, right?
That's a great point. So, you're right, because that's the name you always see.
Yeah. And so, sometimes a tenant will run out and get their own broker, but I say, remember, both brokers are splitting a commission being paid by the landlord. See, what the niche that I've created for myself, Matt, is that I only work for tenants and I only get paid by tenants. So when I give a tenant advice, they don't have any reason to wonder, well, what's in it for him? What's in it for Dale? They can trust the advice I give them and the 30 years of real estate experience. Writing this For Dummies book, this is actually my third book that I've written on this subject. The For Dummies book was the most successful one. And it's a real passion for me. Most restaurant owners are really nice people. I would like to have more of them as my friends, but I wouldn't let them touch my lease. Right?
Yeah.
They're just not, they just can't hold their own against a seasoned real estate broker or the landlord or the landlord's attorney. So in comes Dale, and that's my specialty.
And that's a great topic, because a lot of times business owners try to do things like this on their own. I've negotiated 2 leases on my own, and I look back on both of them, and the last one was pretty minuscule for our company, a small little office in downtown. But the one that I had with the gym that I was involved with, I look back on that and I wonder, man, what could I have done differently? Where did I go wrong? Because I remember when the floors of the bathroom, everything got done because it was a build out for almost brand new, empty warehouse, and the floors get all done except for they didn't put any tile down. And I'm like, there's a floor drain this high off the ground. And I'm like, where's the tile? Oh, you guys are doing the flooring. And I'm like, well, you put the bathroom in. What the hell? So I started looking back at the lease, and it just wasn't my forte. And I'm sure had I had a lease coach, somebody like yourself, just like we would have hired attorneys and hired accountants and hired people to mow the grass, I think sometimes we see a space. And what I've happened with this space, we fell in love with the space before we had a lease that worked out, because I think you get a little too excited and emotional when you get into that process that you just settle.
Well, or you just get too invested in it. You spend weeks and weeks and sometimes months working on a deal on a specific location, and then if the terms aren't good, it just feels like it's too late to back out.
Yeah.
Right? You're too far down the rabbit hole. And so I like to tell tenants they should start with multiple deals, multiple locations, and start walking them down the aisle together. You only take one of them to the altar. You only do one deal, but it's important to have some decoy locations. One of the things that's going to give a tenant the most negotiating power is to be able to say, well, this landlord over here wants me and this landlord over here wants me. What are you going to do for me? Right?
Yeah.
The tenant is the landlord's customer. But the tenants don't realize that. As soon as the landlord says, well, show us your financial statement, show us your personal net worth statement, how are you qualified to run a restaurant in our building, right? And I flip that around for the tenant and I say, hold on, you got a building here with 4 vacancies. Do you need this restaurant tenant? Do you want this restaurant tenant? And they say, well, yeah, we want him. Well, then what are you going to do for us, right?
Yep.
What are you going to do for us?
So what about free months in the beginning? I actually was watching a show recently, one of the Profits with Marcus Lemonis, and he was investing in a business and going through some stuff. And he told the guy, he's like, hey, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to ask for 2 years of free lease of no payments. And the guy's like, what? And he's like, yeah, he's like, the building's been vacant for a couple of years. Why the hell not? And sure enough, he asked for 2 years, and the guy's like, hey, we'll give you a year. And he's like, there you go. We just saved 50 grand.
Yeah, exactly. The most free rent I've ever gotten for a tenant was a 10-year lease, and I got the tenant the first 4 years free. Right? Now that's a grand slam home run. I won't repeat that, but I'll share with you this one. Half of our clients are franchise and half of them are independent. And this franchise tenant came to us and said, Dale, I want to open up some new stores. You do my site selection, you do my negotiation, but don't me locations that I get at least 3 months of free rent. And so after about 3 weeks, I brought him the locations, I brought him the deals, and I said, but on this location, I didn't get you 3 months of free rent. I got you 12 months of free rent. He said, 12 months? How did you get me 12 months of free rent? And I said, well, I asked for 18, right? Very similar to that story you told. But that's real life. And you can't do that on every particular property. There are opportunities out there. And tenants, tenants just leave so much money on the table and they never, ever know it. They just don't know it. For example, when I'm giving a seminar like a restaurant show in California or Florida or New York, wherever, and I've got 40 or 50 people in the room at my seminar, say, who knows the estate brokers and the landlord wants to get a big deposit out of it? And usually the answer is this case in case we don't pay our rent. They want to get a great big deposit out of you to offset the agent's commission, right? Because as soon
Oh,
as you sign your lease, the landlord has to write a $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 commission check. So if the real estate agent can bring in a $30,000 deposit, it makes it easier for the landlord to pay him, right? Crazy world,
wow.
but that's what happens. So, and I want to put something into context, Matt, for the viewers here, for the listeners. The advice I give and the work that I do is a little bit different if you're starting up a brand new restaurant or if you're doing a lease renewal, okay? Because
Okay.
if you're doing a lease renewal, most restaurant tenants don't want to leave. 85% of all will renew their. If you're a brand new startup, you can go into one of 100 different buildings. You don't, if you're patient, you don't have to go, you don't have to do a bad deal, right? But sometimes they think they do, and sometimes they say, well, you pick this location from
I think I lost you. Can you hear me?
lacking. And it's the lack of parking that will sometimes bury will bury a tenant. Now, have you lost me on the screen, or am I still there?
I can hear you now. It went from no audio and video
there we
to
go.
there we go.
There we go. I got you back. Okay.
Yeah,
And
no,
if
you're
there's not enough parking, what are they going to do?
yeah, you're screwed. And we actually had that's funny you mentioned that because a gym that we have I used to be a partner of that
So
is can you hear me okay? I think your signal went kind of wacky on me. You're frozen. Let me remove you and put you back on. There we go. Can you hear me now?
I can hear
Yeah,
you.
so the gym that I
Okay.
was a partner in, when we negotiated
Yes, I
that
can.
lease, it was it was
And
right next to a post office. Huh? Yeah, I've lost you. There's a lag and some bad signal coming from your end, I think. I don't know if it's my end or
Yeah,
your end.
I can hear you. But it was a parking issue then for that post office issue, right?
Yeah, so the gym was next to a post office, and when we leased it, we leased this part of the parking lot. Well, the post office, for whatever reason, thought they owned the building, which was even funnier because they tried to kick us out of our own parking lot, and they realized that they were renting, not own the building. And so then they started looking at the lease and realized that part of the spots that the landlord had committed to us was a back part of this parking lot they had never used. And so they came in and started parking everywhere where we thought we had leased. So we had all this space we thought, and it shrunk. And we start looking at the plot with the landlord, and it's like, oh, well, we went from thinking we had 60 to 80 spaces back here. The lease only called for 40, so we knew that. But we thought we had this wide open area, and here's the post office who had 100 parking spots in front of their building. Now, because we're there, they want to park behind the building to take all of our damn spots. But it was a pretty bad 3 or 4 months starting off because it was like the wild west of parking back there.
Sure. I understand.
Well, we got a big lag here. I think we'll do another episode. We get a better signal and some less technical. I don't know if it's on my end or your end, but I got the book here. You all need to get it. It's available in bookstores. It's also on this website called Amazon, Negotiating Commercial Leases and Renewals for Dummies. You can also check out more on Dale at theleasecoach.com, theleasecoach.com. And we will get Dale back on another time because we're both having some internet and technical issues, and we'll figure that out. But Dale, thanks for coming on if you can still hear me, and we'll see you next time.